Okay, I'm finally doing it. I am finally completing my Necron Combat Patrol. It's only taken, what, 6 months plus? Something like that? Or it's been like a year. I don't remember when I even put out the first episode of this little series that I'm doing, where I built the warriors. It's been a while that I've been kind of procrastinating on this. But I'm going to complete it today. So, since I am building the Necrons from the Command Edition, which, for some reason, it comes with the Overlord. It comes with 10 warriors. It comes with 3 destroyers, 3 scarab swarms, a plasma sight. Everything that's in a Necron Combat Patrol, except for the one last piece, which is the Canoptic Doomstalker. It's from the 9th edition, which they had this in there for the 9th edition ones, right? I don't know why it's not included in that, but since it's not, I had to go out and get it on its own. So, we're going to finally put this guy together, finish up this Combat Patrol. Now, let's get to assembling.
So, assembly of the Doomstalker is fairly straightforward. Head, neck, and left side of the body go together, then the 2 halves of the big gun get put together, and they get pinched in between the right and left sides of the body. Fairly straightforward. After that, the powerball sections, which, yes, that is what I'm calling these things, get attached to the body with the armor around the big gun. And then we just attach both armor plates to the top half of the body, and the body is basically done. Then, work on the legs begins, which they had a good amount of mold lines, and some areas I didn't really clip very close to the leg, so I had to, scrape that and cut that off a bit. Just needed a little bit of cleaning, since a lot of the areas are just kind of like flat surfaces. There is also something I missed, and this is where learning experience number 1 comes in. If something doesn't look like it fits with the rest of the model's aesthetic, it's probably okay to clip it off. Until a good bit into the painting section, I didn't snip off this bit between the legs. Dick joke. I don't know why I didn't do it, but it just slipped my mind. So, if it doesn't match, it is probably just a bit of a sprue that can be gotten rid of. Once I had the legs all cleaned up, they all just push fit together, just like the main body did. To get the thing ready for, painting and priming and stuff, I put the final piece of rubble in and I attached to the base, so it's now ready for, priming and painting. I grabbed my Citadel Chaos Black spray can for the base layer of primer, and then I used Citadel's Gray Sear for a Zenithal Prime. When it comes to the actual painting, I did basically the same process as all of the other Necrons I've done in this Combat Patrol. Every paint I used is from the Duncan Rhodes Tooth and Cones paint line, maybe a little bit of Vallejo in there though. And to start off, I grabbed Berserker Red and I put that through the airbrush. After pulling apart the top from the legs, because it's just literally it's just a bit of plastic sticking up that doesn't really hold it in there. It just sits on top and can kind of spin. I pulled the 2 parts apart. I sprayed the Berserker Red up from under the main body to try and get into the shadowed areas, like under the big armor plates, the main section of the body, and the armor that's kind of sitting underneath the body, the stuff that's attached through the big power balls. I tried not to spray certain areas with this, areas that I would think would be exposed to the sky. I tried holding off hitting them with the Berserker Red to see if I could get them to pop a little later with some of the other colors. Once I was done with the body and spraying that with the airbrush, I moved on to the legs, which were a little bit harder to spray. I wanted to get the Berserker Red onto mostly the backs and undersides of the legs, but there's a few bits and pieces in the way, like that sprue that I didn't cut, that it took a little bit to find the right angle to spray them. In the end though, it all worked out and I got the parts looking the way that I wanted them for the shadowed areas. Then I cleaned out the airbrush, filled it with the mid-tone of Sanguine Scarlet, and began spraying the tops of the armor on the main body. But as I was doing that, something about the paint just felt off to me. And this is where we have learning experience number 2. Adding more might just make more problems. Instead of clearing the airbrush, I just added more paint and thinner, and the consistency just kind of went back and forth. Initially, I thought it was too thin, so I added more paint. Then I thought it was too thick, so I added more thinner. You know, bouncing back and forth between a few times between too thick and too thin, and it's like I couldn't get the consistency right. So instead of just bouncing back and forth, maybe starting over and changing the consistency from there would have worked better, along with maybe adjusting a few more settings on like the compressor and stuff. I don't know. But like I said, I thought the paint was too thin, so I added a bit more paint to the hopper and started again. At the time, I thought it had a good consistency, but looking back, it might have been a little bit too thick after adding that bit more in. But once I finished the tops of the armor on the body near the gun, I sprayed the armor near the neck of the destroyer and on its faceplate. And now, you know, this is the point where I'm noticing that it might have been a little too thick when spraying those areas. But like they say, hindsight's 20/20, right? After I finished the front armor and faceplate, I moved to the back and sprayed some of the upper areas on the Powerball armor sections that are outside of the big armor plates. Once those sections were done, I moved down to the small areas underneath the armor that were sticking out and would likely be getting hit by the light. Like the areas that are part of the Powerball armor that are not under those big armor plates or the main body. I really wanted to blend the Berserker Red and Sanguine Scarlet together on those areas. And it actually kind of worked out how I wanted it to. I was looking for a kind of soft blend between the two colors, but not like a full fade into each other. Mostly, I just didn't want a hard edge. I wanted it to like kind of fade in, but not fully. Once that was done, I sprayed the armor panels on the sides of the big gun, and then I started with the legs. Starting with the lower parts of the leg near the ground and working my way up each leg. I hit the front and sides and tops of the leg armor that would be exposed to the light. I was trying to avoid directly hitting the back and bottoms of the legs where I had sprayed the Berserker Red on them. And now from this point on, well, with a little bit more spraying later, I start with the brushwork. Starting with Cercote Silver, I painted in all of the mechanical joints on the legs. After painting the first one, I realized, through my own stupidity, back to learning experience 1, that bit of sprue between the legs is not supposed to be there. So I finally decided, you know what, let's cut it off and trim it up and paint the areas and continue painting those joints. Once I finished the bottom ball joints, where like the back of the knees would be, kind of, I started on the bigger ones near the top of the legs. It's literally just like painting the whole thing silver and calling it good. And once I was done with those, I worked on the smaller detail bits. What would be the inside of the hydraulics that move the legs and the bolts that attach them to the legs themselves. And once those are done, I'm almost done with the lower half of the Doomstalker. But since I'm currently using the silver, I don't really want to change colors, I might as well work on the other bits that I want to look metallic. So I'm going to work on some of the detail work on the main body, starting with the round joints that connect the guns to the body and the raised metal areas on the guns. I tried to paint them as cleanly as possible. I wanted to try and keep areas where there's going to be plasma clean, so I can try something I haven't done before with those areas. It took a bit for me to get both guns and joints painted up, and once they were, I moved on to the neck area and covered that with the Cercote Silver. I think that took me far too long to paint because I was trying to get into the inside of the base area, or the inside of the base of the neck with the paintbrush, and yeah, I should have called it good and just moved on. But once I finished the neck, I moved on to the spikes on the back of the model that connect the body to the gun. Once I got those spikes done, I grabbed a slightly larger brush and I started to work on the gun, because that is going to need a lot of Cercote Silver on it. Basically everywhere that's big and flat is getting silver on this gun. There are some of those areas where I do plan on putting some red accents after I get the silver done, just to, spice it up a little bit, but currently just putting silver all over the gun. Once all that silver's down, I then grabbed some Sanguine Scarlet and started with kind of touching up and painting a few more things. I wanted the back of the gun in between the armor plates to be red so that it would kind of blend in with a little bit of the armor around it. At the time, it felt like it was the right choice, but looking at it now, I think it blends in too well. I should have added a few more accent colors to it because from the side, it really blends in with the armor plates on either side of it. I don't think it looks bad, but it just doesn't stand out enough. I could add stuff to make it stand out more, like a few more accent colors, but I don't think I will because, well, it'll help show my progression as a miniature painter, with this being like my first combat patrol. Once I finished up that armor piece on the gun, I started to do kind of touch-ups and a little bit like, yeah, I'd call them touch-ups to where the airbrush was. Once that section of the gun was done, I did the sides of the armor plates next to it that I couldn't hit well with the airbrush. And then I also gave those armor pieces another coat of Sanguine Scarlet because I didn't think they were looking that good because of, you know, how bad I am with the airbrush. I also did the same with the large armor plates because I don't think I had the consistency correct in the airbrush, like I've said a few times now. So I just went back through with the brush. I did both sides of the armor on the upper part of the Doomstalker, and then after that, I did some touch-up on the faceplate and the other bits of armor that are Sanguine Scarlet for the upper body. After that, I grabbed the legs, and I decided to touch up the main parts of the legs that would be hit with light. I say touch-up, but it wasn't really a touch-up. I kind of just repainted the whole damn thing on the front 3 sides of the legs. It was a bit more than a touch-up. I really wanted the shadow areas to stand out for there to be a noticeable difference between the light and like the dark areas underneath. And now we kind of get to the point where I wanted to try something different. For a lot of places that have a power source or they are a power source, or like the plasma coil on the guns or something like that, I painted it with white to try and get the demon red that I'm going to put over it a bit more of a pop. I started with the small stuff in between the sections on the big gun, and then I moved on to the balls, the power balls underneath the armor. Shut up. And also the core in the middle of the Doomstalker. I also decided to kind of experiment at this moment. I wanted to see the difference between adding in the white or just leaving it primed in black. I know this is the same concept as Zenithal highlighting basically, or Zenithal priming or whatever it is, but I just want to see like a better definition of like the difference between them, in my eyes at least, after, you know, doing a little bit of painting already on areas. Before I got to spraying though, I noticed a few areas I hadn't painted yet. So I grabbed the brush and some Sanguine Scarlet and quickly painted the 4 longer tips of the big gun and the tips of the smaller guns. You know, give them that red pop on the ends. I also noticed there were some armor areas near the small guns that I hadn't painted yet because I just completely overlooked them, so I quickly painted those guys. Now it's time for the highlight color of Demon Red. And this is where most of my mistakes, learning experiences, happen while painting this model. So, learning experience number 3. Put more damn paint and thinner in the hopper. This links back in with learning experience 2. I don't know what I was thinking here. I've got all of these areas to spray. The vents on top of the armor, the balls underneath the armor, the power source in the middle of the model, the plasma stuff on the guns, plus doing a bit of overspraying for the lighting around the power sources. And I only put like that much in the hopper? What is wrong with me? Like there is not enough in there. I'm noticing that now, and like I said, learning experience. So I started with spraying down on the vents on the top of the armor, and on the white painted side of the balls and power source. I know, I'm immature. I did add some more paint and thinner to the hopper, but I still don't think it was enough from the look of it, you know, after having not watched this footage for a while. And then we get to learning experience number 4, which also links back to learning experience number 2 and 3. Do a bit more testing with the airbrush. I don't think I ever got the right consistency with the paint, because even looking at it now, months after doing this, it doesn't look great. And I'm still not able to get a consistent stream, I feel like, of paint. Sure, I haven't used the airbrush in a while because I really haven't had models. Well, I have models to use it on. I just haven't, done a lot of painting recently. So I think the big thing for me is I need to improve the control of my airbrush and just consistency of the paint and thinner in the hopper. Like, it feels like sometimes when I am using the airbrush, the paint just bursts out and isn't consistent. So I think I need more practice with it. But once I had all the stuff underneath the armor sprayed, I moved on to other specific areas. I hit the inside of the big gun's barrel with the Demon Red. Then I sprayed the eye area on the faceplate to give it, a bit of a highlight color for the glowing eye. Now we hit learning experience number 5, which kind of applies to a lot of things. If you make a plan, try and remember the plan. I had planned on using the Demon Red through the airbrush on those small areas within the gun that I painted white before, but I either forgot about that part or because I didn't feel confident in the spraying mix, I just decided to go with a paintbrush method instead of, spraying and overspraying it to give it that little bit of a glow. I don't remember what my actual reasoning was, if there was any, but knowing me, it was probably the first option that I just forgot. So after forgetting that part and being too lazy to refill the airbrush because I already cleaned it, I started to just use a smaller paintbrush. I think a 00 or a 1 and some more Demon Red to paint those areas because at the time I had just remembered about them. So for paintbrush highlights, I started off with the big gun. I painted the top pipes and down in the little grooves between the silver paint. Also did a little touch up on the eyes and then started work on the smaller gun plasma areas. Just kept using the Demon Red on the small orb areas first and then painted in the plasma coil areas on the back section of those guns. And I tried to not get too much paint on the metal parts around it. It was a little bit of a pain to do that, especially on the inside half of the guns, but I think in the end it all worked out. Once those were done, I started to do actual edge highlighting and regular highlighting. Starting with the very top of the armor where I knew a lot of light would be hitting the model, I used the Demon Red to try and emulate the lighting that I wanted. Looking back, this might have been a step too far for highlighting. I should have probably done maybe just edge highlighting or more specific areas of highlighting instead of what I am doing, and that brings us to our 6th learning experience. If it feels like too much, just stop. So while doing this highlighting stuff, I tried to add a little bit of water to kind of try and smooth out the areas I just painted because I didn't feel like it was going down that well. And I don't think it worked as much as I wanted it to. Or I wanted to make it just a little bit thinner. This may have been my attempt at wet blending that just kind of went awry. But me being me, I tried it on both sides and I don't think it turned out how I wanted it to or envisioned it to turn out. So yeah, that was a problem. And once I got done fiddling with highlighting that armor, I started to highlight other stuff. I highlighted the upper parts of the spikes on the big gun and started on the armor around the big gun. The 2 pieces of armor on either side of the big gun, I should say. I did kind of learn my lesson because I stuck to mostly edge highlighting here. I did a little bit of extra area lighting on the very top panel of the armor or on either side, but then just hit some of the upward facing edges with the Demon Red to give them a little bit of a pop. I then dropped down to the small guns and some of the armor on the back of the body that wasn't under anything and would actually be kind of hit by the sun. After that, I started to highlight the top of the back section of the gun, of the big gun, since it was sky facing and it was mostly just, all the big flat panels that were exposed and not under the armor. Then I started to edge highlight the legs. I started in the middle where it's a flat horizontal section and just highlighted all of that with Demon Red because it's a skyward facing surface. Then I edge highlighted the tops of the upper knee pad area. And just to see if I should edge highlight any higher, I put the body back on, and then just highlighted a small area on the upper part of the leg that is also skyward facing. Then I started to do some edge highlighting on the bottom sections of the legs, or the side sections I should say. Basically every edge on the front of the legs got a highlight. After I finished all the highlights on the legs, I went back to the body and painted all of the tubing, going from the body of the Doomstalker to the guns with Demon Red, because I still hadn't done that yet. Then I grabbed some more White Star paint from 2 thin coats and mixed it with Demon Red to make a red that was a little more desaturated. This red I wanted to put closer to like the center of where the power sources would be, because as you get to like the center of a power source, it becomes brighter. So like that was kind of my thinking towards it. Like it'd be brighter and a bit more desaturated in the center. I think that's how color theory works with light bulbs. I'm not sure. I'm guessing here. I might be a good bit mistaken though. Or this might just not be the right way to do it. One of the two. But I use this desaturated red on the power balls underneath the armor, on the main core of the Doomstalker, the eye area of it, on each of the plasma balls on the small guns, and on the plasma coils on each of the guns. I also used it as a bit of a highlight on the tube sections that I painted with Demon Red. Then I added a quick dot of it to each of the in-between sections on the big gun that I had painted with Demon Red. Once I was satisfied with that highlight, I put a little like reflection dot of pure White Star on the power areas. And this is another thing that looking at it now, I don't think it turned out too well, and it's another learning experience. So learning experience number 7. Some ideas don't always translate between mediums, or shouldn't, be used between mediums on stuff like this. Because I was starting to get more into drawing it this time, and using highlight dots to emphasize eyes and reflections is kind of a big thing with that. So I thought it would maybe translate to this. It didn't really translate that well. And I'll be honest, it looks kind of dumb. I think it looks kind of dumb because it's just a pure white dot there. Maybe blending it a little bit differently would have helped, but that's for, when I try again with stuff like this. Like it's not dumb everywhere. It's just like on the bigger sections, it kind of looks dumb. I like the white dot on the small guns plasma balls, but it looks really dumb on the ones under the armor. I do think it works on the plasma coils on the small guns also. I did put a little bit on the areas inside the big gun, but you can't see them that well because it's such a small area. After I did all that, I grabbed some black from Vallejo's game color line and painted the wires on the legs. After those were done, I decided to paint the connection points of the wires with Cercote silver. Then I noticed a couple of areas I missed on the big gun that I wanted silver and quickly painted those up too. For the final step, I grabbed some mithril blade from 2 thin coats and did a little bit of metal highlighting. I hit the big flat areas on top of the big gun, the skyward facing parts on the little guns, and the parts that were sticking out on the back of the metal spines. And for a finishing touch, I lightly painted the raised areas of the symbols on the edges of the big armor pieces so that they would kind of pop out more. Then I realized I didn't paint other metal wires leading to the guns and quickly did that and called the model done. So, in hindsight, which is 2020, I made a good amount of mistakes when painting this model, but I think being able to acknowledge those mistakes will help me grow as a painter if I remember to fix them and improve next time. Biggest thing is, I think this was a good start for my painting journey. And before we get to the nice shots of the Doomstalker and the entire Combat Patrol, I just want to remind you that if you like the video, please do all the algorithm stuff. Like, subscribe, all of that. If you feel like supporting the channel a little bit more, I do have a Patreon set up. That's in the description. But most importantly, I hope you have a royal day or night. And now let's get to those sexy shots.